Um, Real YouTube is bring on an expert. Oh wait, no. Wait, hang on. Real YouTube is understand mechanics. We have an expert, so you're gonna learn. The worst part is like when I forget what I'm gonna say, or like I think of something to say and then forget it mid singing. That's embarrassing. Anyway, what's going on, everybody? Today we are joined once again by Trey. Trey, you want to say hello to everybody? Oh, sorry. Do you prefer DaWoblefet? I always call you Trey, and I forget.
You can call me either in the video.
Okay.
The one thing that you do to make sure your commenters need to understand is that they need to spell
I
Trey
saw
with
that.
the
They were spelling it Trae. I've never been so
Yeah.
embarrassed. It's
Yeah.
Trey, correct?
Well, yes, but it's not as bad as misspelling your name. Like
Yeah.
I still see people misspelling Wolfey. They do
They
all
move the E.
Wolfie, or they do Glicky.
Glicky tilts me so hard. I never talk about it because I know people are going to do it now that I've complained about it, but they always move the E. It's WOLF space GLICKE. It tilts me. But no, yeah, I felt bad that everyone was spelling your name wrong. I mean, this is the only way I've ever spelled Trey, so it never even occurred to me to spell it another way, but yeah. Anyway, so today we're doing something cool. Today, Trey's going to be talking about, what do you want to call this? Like, order, the thread is called Order of Move Success Checks. But basically, like, you should probably explain this one, actually, because, like, you can do a better job than I can.
Yeah, so this is a post that I made recently that took me approximately 4 months of research. It was a lot of time investment into this. And it's basically saying, if you have multiple effects that could stop a move from working, which one happens first? So, like, for example, if you're paralyzed and taunted, and you try to use the status move, what happens first, the taunt or the paralysis?
I would say
something
paralysis.
like that. You might think would be inconsequential. Actually, I think taunts first, if I remember right.
I'm wrong about everything?
But you can go through this list in order to find this order. And so you might be already looking at this list and be thinking,
it's long,
what
too.
is it? It is a long list. There are 69 different checks, which was not planned, but it is very interesting, to say the least. This is actually more useful than I think some players give it credit for. It's primarily used as a research tactic because it's very, very helpful for other battle mechanics researchers to have this down. But there's lots of different practical implications that we can draw out of it as well as VGC players. And so I'd like to go through a few of these today with Wolf in order to potentially show you guys how to make use of a list like this for your competitive play. I think one of the most important things that you can figure out from this list is whether or not a move effect will trigger Libero. So Cinderace obviously being so popular, we need to be able to figure out, okay, if I use this move in this situation, Libero will activate. If I recall correctly, I saw a match from Players' Cup. I believe it was Marcus, who said that they lost a Players' Cup match because they weren't familiar with Libero's mechanics.
Yeah, with Sucker Punch, as I recall.
Yes, and so by using this thread, you can potentially inform yourself of how different interactions will behave or should behave if you're not as familiar. And then you can basically check through and see those different things. For example, on our list, I believe Libero is check number 33. So if you scroll down to there, you can see check number 33 is Libero. So what that means is that anything that happens before Libero on the list, so anything from 1 to 32, will not trigger Libero if it happens. And anything after Libero will trigger it. So let's go through a couple examples of that because it might be helpful to see.
Holy cow,
so for
yeah,
example,
I'm already seeing some stuff. But yeah, like I saw Psychic Terrain and I thought that was really interesting. But yeah, go ahead.
Exactly. Psychic Terrain is a great example of one that will trigger a Libero. So you can see that Libero is before Psychic Terrain. So that means if you use Sucker Punch into Psychic Terrain, Libero would trigger and you would become Dark type. So potentially you could use this, say if you were in a last ditch situation and you absolutely need to block an Expanding Force. You could Sucker Punch if you absolutely had to, and you had to pivot around for something of that nature. However, conversely, I should say, you can see Queenly Majesty is before Libero. So that means if you use Sucker Punch into Serena while Serena is out on the field, that means that Sucker Punch or Libero won't trigger and Cinderace won't turn into a Dark type. So you can use examples like this. The Sucker Punch failure itself is in check 27. It's one of the first move failure checks, so it's really, really early.
Yeah.
You can also see things like Double Protects. Failing a Double Protect won't cause you to turn into a normal type, although typically...
Yeah, it'd be almost impossible to...
You'd almost always be in that situation. And you can see like lots of different other stuff in here as well. And so you might say, well, I don't think my Cinderace is ever going to be using Last Resort or anything like that, but this list was intended to be comprehensive. So you've got to understand that as you're looking through things. Another thing that I think is useful that potentially you can learn from is the type changing mechanics. So for example, suppose you have suppose you're facing Jamie Boyd and he's using Electrify. Because you want to make sure you understand your mechanics versus Jamie Boyd, and say you have a Sylveon. All right. So if say if Sylveon uses Hyper Voice, and the what's it called, Boltland, I think that's how you say it. Boltland, uses Electrify.
Electrify, for those of you unaware, changes the target's next move into Electric type, and Sylveon's ability Pixelate changes all Normal type moves into Fairy type move. So the question is, does it change to an Electric move, which is what I would assume, because Electrify in theory would overwrite the Normal typing, or does it maintain a Fairy move, because this is kind of a weird fringe case? But yeah, go on.
Exactly, and that sort of interaction you can tell by looking at the move checklist. So you can see here, I believe that's check 18. You can see, I think it's 18 through 21. Move type is determined really early, and it's determined that early because of Lightning Rod. But you can see here that 18 says check for Pixelate, and you can see in 20 that it says check for Electrify. And so you can see, based on this list, that it goes Pixelate and then it goes Electrify. So it would turn into a Fairy type move for like 2 seconds, and then it'd be overwritten by Electrify.
I see.
And so it would end up being an Electric type move. However, that's not always the case, which is interesting. If you Dynamax your Sylveon and you use
what?
Right? Yeah. Okay. Well, it's a wait a minute. Is that right? That should be right. Yeah. If you Dynamax your Sylveon, it also well, I should say. All right. Let me back up.
Okay. Yeah, I'm very confused. That doesn't sound. Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah. So Pixelate does happen afterward, but it doesn't interact with Electrify in this way. The only way you can see this is with Plasma Fists. That's why I was like getting myself confused. I'm like, wait a minute, but Electrify would always change it.
So if you use a max move, I see. I understand. Sorry, I understand. Okay, so basically what you're saying is that the type is still Electric, but the max move would still originally be Max Fairy.
Close. What I'm trying to distinguish here. So we can see here that Pixelate basically gets overwritten by Electrify. The Plasma Fists, I guess, basically you could think of it as behaving a little bit differently. So Plasma Fists, again, wouldn't be VGC relevant, but it turns Normal type moves into Electric
moves,
type. That also has happened with the move Ion Deluge.
Yeah.
And so if you use that with regular Sylveon, basically what would happen is, say you use Plasma Fists and then you use Hyper Voice with Sylveon. So Sylveon would turn the Normal type move into a Fairy type move. And then Plasma Fist would see nothing. It wouldn't have nothing to turn into because there's no Normal type move anymore. There's no Normal type move anymore for it to change. And so this Fairy type move is now just a Fairy type move. But it's not the same way with Max moves. With Max moves, if you use Plasma Fists, for some reason that kicks in first, and then Pixelate applies.
Okay.
So it's different with Plasma Fists.
Very weird.
You can see here we're already getting quite into the weeds with some of the very, very precise technical what happens before what. Another example that we might look at from our list is with safety goggles. This is another relevant one. This has come up for me before in tournament matches. So if you look at safety goggles, let me find what number safety goggles is. Safety goggles is check number 49.
Okay.
And so you might ask yourself, say you have an Amoonguss, and you use Spore into a Pokemon as they switch it in, say like they switch it in electric terrain. So say they switch it in an electric terrain, and maybe it's like an Incineroar. So maybe the Incineroar has safety goggles. You don't know. Say you don't know. You don't have the opponent's team. So they use Spore, and they use Spore into that Incineroar. Now, if it had safety goggles would trigger before electric terrain would block the sleep. And you can tell this way down because electric terrain is all the way down in 57. So you can see that safety goggles is way up in 49, but electric terrain is very far down in 57. So by using Spore, you would be able to identify a potential safety goggles pretty reliably. There's not too much sleep protection that's higher than safety goggles, especially not that you'd see in BGC.
Right.
So that is another example of something that you can pull out of it. What you should also know, in addition to this list that I have here, if you scroll back up to the top, you'll see in bolded, I have a link that says this Google Sheet. And if you open that up, you'll see that it opens up a
Oh my.
very large document. I'm not sure how much you'll be able to see on Wolf screen, but you can see that it's basically the same list, but it has additional information, for example, with stomping terrain, whether or not they affect double stomping terrain, if multiple of the same effect are present. So, like, for example, if you have multiple lightning rod Pokemon, which one read Rex, and various situations related to that, and potentially additional notes on the move. So you can use this list as a quick way of checking a lot of different mechanics if you're trying to figure out in what order something fails. This is a really good way of doing so. I also should mention, just because it's cool, this checks before move success was actually very instrumental for figuring out. You remember when we had the Sucker Punch glitch back in 1.0?
Yeah. Oh, was that? Wait, what was the Sucker Punch glitch? Did it make games disconnect?
Remember when it would like randomly fail?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it was right at the start of Switch.
Sword and Shield.
It was right at the start of it, and we actually taken research from the previous generation in this area and applied it here in order to be able to figure that out. The research that we applied was quite unrelated, but it was very interesting. So suppose you have two Lightning Rod Pokemon. Suppose you have two Lightning Rod Pokemon out on the field, and you use Thunderbolt.
I actually don't know the answer. I assume the opponents. I think the opponents targets before your partner, but if they have two, I don't know what happens. I assume the one they target, but yeah, go ahead.
Not quite. It's actually determined by speed. So the faster Lightning Rod Pokemon would end up taking the attack.
Wait, even if it's your partner?
Yeah, even if it's your partner.
Oh!
Cool. So speed will be the thing that determines it. But then you might ask, well, what happens if they speed tie? And what's very interesting here is that it's not a speed tie like what you're used to with speed ties. Speed ties, in this sense, are not broken via RNG. It's not an RNG-based speed tie.
Okay.
And so what ends up determining it is basically which Pokemon has been on the field longer. It's very interesting. That's the way that it decides to break the tie.
Weird.
Rather than flipping a coin, it says whichever Pokemon is on the field longer, that Pokemon takes the attack.
That's so weird. And what happens if they've been on the same field for the same amount of time?
Exactly. And so you might ask that question.
I did.
And so what ends up happening is, okay, well, it ends up being the player who is considered to be the host, the so-called host of the match, which in Sword and Shield is going to be the Pokemon or the player whose trainer card is on the left.
Okay.
So whoever trainer card is on the left will be the person who would win in that situation. So,
and what if both Lightning Rod users are on the opponent's side?
Both Lightning Rod users are on the opponent's side, then it will be, I believe, if they both speed tie and are on the opponent's side, it will be the left one. It'll be the left slot. The left slot is considered to be out before the right slot.
That's crazy. That's actually insane.
And so you can go down this rabbit trail forever and figure out all that kind of stuff. And so you can see, if you notice on the Google Sheet, you'll see if multiple are present, you'll see that with raw speed with non-RNG speed tie, that's what that means.
I see it.
And so this is quite a long list, and Wolf and I do not have time to go through and document every single interaction in here. But potentially you can take advantage of it. This will be linked down in the description below, so you can review things and potentially learn some information. If you have any questions about the various interactions, I would be happy to answer them. Also of note is that very below my post, there is actually a very helpful Showdown developer who posted what the current order is actually behaving like in Showdown. It is not the same in Showdown. So this is one of the areas that Showdown gets wrong. It's a relatively minor area, besides things like Libero. But this is one of the things that Showdown does get wrong for a lot of its different interactions. So you can use that list to, at least as of July 28th. You can view that, and if you want to see why something behaved differently on Showdown than it did in my post, you can review that. But my post is purely from data on the actual games.
Got it. Awesome. Well, yeah, I mean, this is a really great resource. Thank you so much for sharing it with everybody. I know that, probably not everyone is going to go and look through the nitty-gritty, but I'm sure that there are people who are interested, because knowing the ins and outs of mechanics can be, I've won tournament games off of, knowing more obscure things. One example that comes to my mind is I was at Dallas Regionals, and my opponent had Raichu plus Gyarados, and I had Duraludon. And, I mean, at this point, this is relatively early in the format, so, I was fairly certain that Lightning Rod would be ignored thanks to my Stalwart ability, but if I had gotten that call wrong, I would have lost the set and been out of the tournament earlier than I was. And so Yeah, like knowing like what Trey mentioned with safety goggles and knowing about libero, like these will win you games. At times, like not every game you're gonna win with these, but knowing mechanics can be really helpful. So I think that for anyone interested in competitive Pokemon, this is a useful thing to have under your belt. You don't necessarily need it to the same level that Trey does in order to apply them, but it is still helpful. Trey, I have one question for you, kind of totally unrelated to this, but about mechanics. Sure. Why does first turn Yawn fail in Electric Terrain, but first turn Yawn work in Misty Terrain? And why? Like,
I don't have any idea, and it's different with Safeguard too.
Okay.
Safeguard will prevent.
It blocks the first hit, but not the second.
Yeah, Misty Terrain and Safeguard are office hits on the second turn.
Yes.
I don't know why they're different. I could not tell you.
Okay, cool. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I was curious because it's something that's been bugging me for a while.
It bugs me too. I have no idea why.
Yeah, like you can Yawn in Misty Terrain, but not in Electric. I mean, I guess it's because Electric is only sleep, but even still, Misty Terrain is also sleep. So, okay. Anyway, with all that being said, thanks so much, Trey, for sharing with this with everybody. Hey, if you enjoyed this and if you found this useful, if you want to see more content like this, Trey knows so many things about mechanics, so let us know down in the description below, because we could probably do. I mean, Trey used to do a series called Mechanics Monday, where he would post like a more specific, in-depth analysis like every single week. So obviously, there's a lot more stuff we can get into and down in the nitty-gritty, but. Trey, you have anything you want to say to people before you go? You want to plug your socials, anything like that? Tell people where they can follow you.
You can find me on Twitter primarily if you want to see me post new mechanics interactions that I'm working on at the time. So I'll be twitter.com/DaWoblefet. I also am a real YouTubeist, or at least I used to be. So you can check out my YouTube channel, youtube.com/DaWoblefet. That's another way of finding me. And you can also follow this Battle Mechanics research thread on Smogon. It's not just this post. You can view up and down here for various different interactions, and you can also ask questions in the thread. If you're interested, you can ask questions, and typically people will respond. So there's lots of different ways you can interact with me if you want to learn more about mechanics.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for coming on and sharing your knowledge with us. I'm sure people really appreciate it. Y'all make sure you say thank you to Trey in the comments, because it's a whole wealth of knowledge, and we're very lucky to have someone like him in the community and on the channel. So anyway, with all that being said, thanks for watching. Go show Trey some love. Excuse me, can't speak. And we'll see you next time. Goodbye.